Blurp and The Upmarine, written and read by Jana Slobodova. Once upon a time, not so long ago, in the Great Barrier Reef, there lived a shrimp. Well, okay, there lived many, many shrimps among the many, many fish, crabs, barnacles, jellyfishes, sharks, squids, seahorses, eels, lobsters, and dolphins. But among them, in the middle of all the hustle and bustle, lived this very special shrimp. He looked just like any other banded shrimp, with red and white stripes and curious eyes and long white antennae, so you couldn't really tell he was special in any way. In fact, he was so alike all the other shrimps that he didn't even have a special name. He was called Blurp, just like any other banded shrimp in the Great Barrier Reef. And just like everyone else, he lived in a little crevice and slept during the day, hiding from the hungry triggerfish and eels. But during the night, he would come out and do things that none of the other shrimp understood. You see, Blurp, this particular Blurp, our Blurp, was an inventor. While all of his cousins and uncles and aunties and friends followed the usual shrimp occupation, the fish cleaners. But not our Blurp. Every day the same phrases ricocheted around the reef. Why don't you just give it up? It's not in your nature. You're going against your own DNA. Freak. He's probably just lazy. That's what it is. Cleaning is not good enough for him. What do? You sit here by your cave and tinker, and what is the result? Nothing. Indeed, if you popped in for a visit in the middle of the night, you would find Blurp tinkering away near his crevice. But he didn't think of himself as more important than the others, and he certainly wasn't lazy. He wanted to be useful. His mind kept buzzing with ideas of how to help, how to make things easier and faster and much more exciting. Mind you, he wasn't very successful. In fact, none of his inventions worked so far. Let's see. The first thing he invented was a fish scraper to make the job easier for his relatives. It was very simple, just an old clamshell attached to a twig of coral. Yet if his friends could scrape the dirt off of the other fish in just one smooth move of the scraper instead of picking at it endlessly with their pincers, they could clean way more fish in one day. Except when his dad tried to use it, not only did he scrape off the dirt, but also the fish's scales. Oops. Slightly painful. The next thing he invented was a gate. Banded shrimp always sleep in their own little cave during the day, and a cave gate would make it even safer for them, making sure that eels couldn't spot their hiding place, and even if they did, they wouldn't be able to get at them during their sleep. He used a bigger clamshell this time, attached one side to the rock over the opening to his cousin's cave, and propped the other side with a piece of coral. When his cousin came in the morning, all he had to do was kick the coral out of place and the clam would close shut behind him. And it did, too. The problem was that he couldn't get it open again in the evening. The sea snot that Blurp used to glue the side of the clam to the wall leaked down, and now the entire thing was stuck. For a few days nobody missed him, on the account of shrimp being all alike and almost all called the same name. And when somebody did notice he was missing, his hiding place was so well disguised that it took them another 2 nights of searching to find him. He was very hungry and very, very crabby. This time, however, Blurp was working on something big, something that would change the lives of all the little creatures on the reef. It all began one morning when he was sitting in front of his cave, pondering what other inventions he could bless this world with, getting ready to come home for the day. The first rays of light pierced the darkness, but the light seemed strange, full of shifting shadows. Blurp looked up to see something transparent floating just below the surface of the water. Without thinking of whether or not it was a good idea, he swam up to have a closer look. He discovered that it was some kind of a lidless see-through box. He pulled on it and was able to move it quite easily, so he towed it back to his crevice and parked it right in the front. He secured it with a few rocks, and as the morning was progressing and it was almost completely light now, he quickly hid inside his home. He couldn't sleep, though. He was too excited about his new discovery, and while all the other shrimp were dreaming their crustacean dreams, he came up with an ingenious idea. Something so wild, for sure nobody had ever tried anything like it. He was going to turn the box into an upmarine. And so, when it got dark again, Blurp got out of his cave and inspected his finding properly and came to the conclusion that it was perfect. It had no holes in it, the plastic was considerably clear and see-through, and it was large enough to hold at least 20 shrimp at a time. It was time to get to work. First he found all the material that he needed, mainly coral, some old sea urchin shells, some clams, more sea snot, some seaweed and sharp rocks. Then he flipped the box upside down and created a coral structure along the edges of the open side of the box. The structure ran along the edges and connected the corners diagonally. In the middle, where the coral that connected the opposite corners met, he secured the whole thing with an extra strong length of seaweed. Next, he made the propeller out of some clams. They were big enough to push the whole thing upward. He used more coral to make the shaft and the pedals, and he made cogs out of some sea urchin shells. Finally, he put it all together using a lot more sea snot and seaweed. A bigger variety of resources was not really available. The pedals attached to the construction powered the propeller that was at the bottom of the upmarine, pushing her up. It was looking good. The plastic box was at the top, creating some kind of a transparent superdome that would protect the shrimp above the surface. It was done and ready for a test drive. At night it is not easy to find animals that can help you, but Blurp knew where to go. His friend Kyle the hermit crab was always polishing his new home. He wasn't keen on helping Blurp at first, but then he remembered that that was what friends are for. The two stood next to the upmarine, parked in front of Blurp's crevice. It was supported by a scaffolding of more coral to make sure it didn't topple over, with the propeller at the bottom free to turn. Blurp decided to test his vehicle at his favorite time of the day, when the first morning light begins to seep through the dark and you can still swim around safely. Kyle looked at the monstrous contraption with the dome of the plastic box at the top and the propeller at the bottom. He was worried, but decided to trust his friend. Blurp swam into the box, and Kyle held onto the construction with his strong pincers and started to push the pedals with his legs. Immediately the propeller began to turn, and the upmarine slowly lifted off the seafloor. Kyle got into a rhythm, and the box rose steadily, approaching the surface. Blurp was excited. He didn't know if it was going to work, and if it did, he would be the first shrimp to look at the sea from above the surface and survive. They were getting closer when Blurp gave a signal and Kyle started pedaling harder. The top of the box reached the surface, and for a split second it seemed that they were not going to get any further. What they needed was enough thrust to lift the top of the box above the surface, with the edges of the box remaining in the water. The suction pressure would ensure that the box stayed full of water, while the passengers in the box would be able to look through the transparent walls and see what is happening around them. Blurp looked at Kyle, who was pedaling as fast as he could, then gave the top of the box a shove, and with that the upmarine rose up from under the water. "We did it!" exclaimed Blurp as he took a look around. Through the walls of the box he had a perfect view of everything around him, and he gasped in astonishment. Wherever his eyes could see there was a vast plain of blue water, and above the sky was ablaze with the sunrise. He saw the big red ball of the sun halfway up on the horizon, and around it the sky was pink, yellow, and blue, and the water sparkled like gold. He did it. He finally invented something great. He was on top of his world. He looked down and saw poor Kyle running out of puff. "We should head back, Blurp. It's getting light." "Okay, cut the engines," Blurp shouted. And with that, Kyle stopped pedaling and they slowly descended back to the ocean floor. "We did it, Kyle, we did it," shouted Blurp as they parked the Upmarine back on the scaffolding and secured it with seaweed. "You should have seen it. Next time you're going up there with me." And Kyle did. The next night at dawn, they gathered all the shrimp and a few more crabs to help with the pedals, and gave their first official ride. It was a sensation. Everyone loved the view of the sea and the colorful morning sky. The word got around, and soon there were crustaceans and plankton coming from different corners of the reef just to take a ride in the Upmarine. Now, if you swam down under the sea at the Great Barrier Reef and asked around for Blurp, everybody would know exactly which one you mean. He's that great inventor, the explorer. Nobody calls him lazy anymore. He is the little banded shrimp who dived up above the surface of the sea. If you want, you can create an Upmarine too. Next time you have a bath, take in a plastic tub with you. Turn it upside down in the water, and then lift the bottom above the water, but leave the edges below, and see what happens.